Now let's return to the first major shakeup in President Trump's cabinet. Kristi Noem is now out as Secretary of Homeland Security. CBS News obtained an internal message she wrote to her employees yesterday. She said in part, quote, "It has been the honor of my life to serve as the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security and lead you." She also confirmed that her last day on the job will be at the end of this month. Let's bring in CBS News Homeland Security correspondent Nicole Sganga. Nicole, good to see you again today. What have you learned about why Trump fired Noem?
Mugo, good to see you. It was the culmination of criticism stemming not just from Capitol Hill, but also around the White House and within the ranks of the Department of Homeland Security. Of course, a lot of talk this week swirling around the controversial $220 million ad campaign that Secretary Noem shot, including scenes from Mount Rushmore that were filmed during a previous government shutdown last year. But beyond that spending, which drew the ire of senators like Senator Kennedy from Louisiana, as well as some within the ranks of the Department of Homeland Security, there had been a longstanding frustration with a memo issued last June, whereby the secretary had to personally approve any spending across DHS, be it at FEMA, CISA, CBP, ICE, of expenditures over $100,000. And there had become some chatter that that was actually preventing FEMA from reimbursing states and local authorities for disaster aid reimbursements, which of course also got picked up on Capitol Hill. And there were both Democratic and Republican lawmakers that criticized the secretary about that this week. This also coming on the tail end of Operation Metro Surge, of course, in Minneapolis. A lot of concerns not only about the number of sweeping arrests that took place in Minneapolis, but how they were carried out. And of course, the fatal shootings of two American citizens, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, not to mention how the Department of Homeland Security worked or didn't work with local authorities to help carry out those investigations, which are now being led by the FBI. On top of all of this, we learned that this week the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee has launched an investigation into allegations by the department's inspector general that DHS took formal steps to try to shut it out of classified systems in order to perform some of its own investigations and audits into DHS programs. So certainly there's a lot here. One source telling me that Secretary Noem simply ran out of friends in Washington, that her last friend was sitting at the White House, President Donald Trump, who of course made the decision early yesterday to replace Noem.
And so now what comes next for Secretary Noem? Can you tell us more about the man who is now tapped to replace her?
Yeah, the man tasked to replace her, Senator from Oklahoma, former member of the House for around a decade, Markwayne Mullin. Take a listen to what he had to say when he was asked about lessons learned during Secretary Noem's tenure at the Department of Homeland Security.
Is there always lessons that can be learned? You know, listen, my wife and I, we have, over the years, we have been fortunate enough to purchase companies and grow our companies, and every day there's something you can do better. And so I think there's an opportunity to build off successes, and there's also opportunities to build off things that maybe didn't go quite as planned.
And Markwayne Mullin has developed a reputation of being a loyalist to this president, of being an immigration hardliner, not dissimilar to his predecessor here. So for those who think the Department of Homeland Security will take a step back from its aggressive immigration operations nationwide, I think it's too soon to say. It will be interesting to see how he engages with some of the components, some of the current DHS leadership there, but certainly, at least within the ranks of the Department of Homeland Security at the White House and on the Hill, a lot of folks optimistic, as they often are, about nominees, and believe that he will be confirmed by the end of this month, March, which, as you mentioned earlier, Mugo, Secretary Noem said yesterday in a message to internal staff that her last day will be March 31st. All of this, of course, coming amid the partial government shutdown. We should remind our viewers that the Department of Homeland Security is limited to just essential personnel right now, as well as some immigration operations. But the Coast Guard, the Secret Service, the Office of Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction, just to name a few, the top cyber defense agencies, agency, CISA, so many of the workforce now operating without a paycheck. So this is certainly a department in disarray at the moment.
Yeah, still some very important things to figure out ahead. Nicole Sganga, thank you so much for your reporting.